Before we jump into today's episode, I want to tell you about something new and something cool that we just made for you. I wrote it myself. Now, here's my assumption. If you are listening to this podcast, it probably means that you want to build long-term wealth with a rental real estate portfolio, and you would probably like to do it with some creative financing. And as I talk to people who want to do that, I know a lot of questions come up, and I thought there's really no great single resource that really captures the entire picture of how that works. But I have solved that problem because I have written a new PDF that is just for you, and it's called the Step-by-Step Guide to Buying Your First or Next Rental Property Without Relying on a Lender to Approve You for a Loan. Like I said, I wrote this thing myself, and if I do say so myself, it's pretty thorough. And in this, you're going to learn a few things. I'm going to teach you about the 3 key strategies to find and negotiate quality off-market real estate deals that nobody else even knows are for sale. I'm going to teach you about what I call the yeses framework for getting off-market sellers to accept your offers. And then I'm also going to teach you the 11 simple steps that you need to take to get your first or your next deal accepted without needing to go to a bank and apply for a loan and just hope that they give it to you. So if you would like to get this free downloadable PDF, just go to rentalwealthguide.com and you can download it right now. rentalwealthguide.com and get your download of the step-by-step guide to buying your first or next rental property without relying on a lender to approve you for a loan. Now, on with the show. Of all the different types of seller leads that you could find, there is one type that is more valuable than all the rest. And this one type has got 2 important traits. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Oh, and by the way, you would never find these people if you thought your job was to look for, quote, motivated sellers. You would just walk right on by, and you're not going to want to miss these people. Let's get into it as soon as we hear the theme song.
Welcome to Racking Up Rentals, a show about how regular people, those of us without huge war chests of capital or insider connections, can build lasting wealth acquiring a portfolio of buy and hold real estate. But we don't just go mainstream looking at what's on the market and asking banks for loans, nor are we posting "We Buy Houses" signs or just looking for, quote, motivated sellers to make lowball offers to. You see, we are people-oriented deal makers. We sit down directly with sellers to work out win-win deals without agents or any other obstacles and buy properties nobody else even knows are for sale. I'm Jeff from The Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur. If you're the kind of real estate investor who wants long-term wealth, not get-rich-quick gimmicks or pictures of yourself holding fat checks on social media, this show is for you. Join me and quietly become the wealthiest person on your block. Now let's go rack up a rental portfolio.
Hey there, this is Jeff, and I want to thank you for joining me for another episode of Racking Up Rentals. Show notes for today's episode can be found at www.thoughtfulre.com/E37. Hey, would you please do us a big favor by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app? It really helps other people who are thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs like you and like me to find us so that we can all join together with this kind of common perspective and school of thought on the right way to do real estate entrepreneurship. Okay, onward. So I just bought a house a couple weeks ago, and I bought it with seller financing. And this isn't just a normal deal, though, for me. This is the 3rd property that I've bought from these sellers over the course of just about 5 years. The first one was in about 2015. And it was a rental property for the sellers, and it became a rental property for me. The second one was a rental property that had the tenants had moved out, and the sellers were ready to sell, and so they gave me a call. And then the one I just bought was a very similar situation. It was a rental house for them, and they wanted to be done with the business, and they had asked this tenant to leave, and I closed on it just a couple weeks before they left. And today, I'm going to actually go over and take a look at their primary residence too. Now, I've been to their primary residence many times, of course, because that's how we've done all of our deals together, literally sitting at their dining room table and mapping out how it would all work. But I've never really gone through the property with the set of eyes of somebody who's looking at buying it. And there's certain parts of the house I've never seen before. So today I'm going over there as well. So there's a good chance this could become my fourth deal with these sellers in about 5 years. Oh, I'd like to add too that all of these properties that I've bought have been with long-term seller financing. I did make a down payment on each of them, of course, and that down payment varied. But at this point, I can tell you I have over $500,000 of low interest, long-term seller financing with these people. In our episode today, we're talking about the most valuable types of seller leads that you can possibly find. And those are the people that you can do multiple deals with, either at once or over time. But we're going to talk today about the idea of doing multiple deals with these people over time. And in another episode, we'll talk about the idea of doing multiple deals with a seller at the same time as well. So today, I want to talk with you about the two traits that really make for these ideal and most valuable seller leads. And the first trait is simply that they are a good fit for your style of acquisition, your approach to acquisition. And the second trait is that they have multiple properties, of course. So let's just dive into each of these two. This will be a simple conversation, but it's going to make a lot of sense. And then we're going to talk about what you can do to put yourself in a position where you can find and connect with these types of people. So the first trait is that they are a good fit for your acquisition strategy. So first of all, you have to know what your acquisition strategy is. And if you are a thoughtful real estate entrepreneur, which I'm guessing you are, else you probably wouldn't be listening to me right now, you have a very relational approach. You have a very, well, first of all, certainly you're talking to these people off market and not through real estate agents. Their property is not listed and you've connected with them. You take a very relational approach. You're in no hurry, just as we discussed in the last episode. We are going as slowly as the conversation feels like it should go and not rushing things at all. And so you're talking with them. And so that means that these people really appreciate your relational approach. And it's probably normally how they like to work as well. But that relational approach that you're taking with them, where you do want to go to their house and sit down and have a conversation over time, is something that really resonates with them. Secondly, they feel comfortable kind of representing themselves. They feel confident in their own ability to navigate this conversation with you and make good decisions and know what they want and know how to go about accomplishing that without feeling like they necessarily need representation on the outside from something like a real estate agent. Oftentimes, these people are a good fit for your acquisition strategy because they don't like the idea of paying fees and commissions. For many of them, this is really a matter of principle. They really don't like the idea of writing a large check out of their proceeds for a real estate agent or agents that they don't really feel like they need. So they're a good fit for you in that sense as well. In a really broad way, they're such a good fit for you because they're very negotiable on all aspects of this deal, all aspects of this conversation. It's not just the price. They're actually very willing to speak with you about the terms as well, the timeline, all of the aspects of how a deal comes together. And what that really means is not just that they're negotiable on all those things, but they're just open to having an open conversation with you, that they aren't acting with their guard up, that they are willing to answer questions with you that might not seem really totally directly relevant to buying their property, but you're trying to understand them and their context and their situation as a whole and how this particular transaction may fit into the bigger picture of their world and their lives. And they're very open to engaging you on that level. And that leads then to them being very negotiable with you and discussing all the aspects of that deal. And in many cases, they are not only open to, but they very well may prefer some form of owner financing, seller financing, or something other that people normally call creative financing. And that might be driven oftentimes by their desire to manage their capital gains obligation that's coming their way if they sell this particular property, especially if this property is an investment for them. And they're often also interested in generating income from the property, not just proceeds from the sale, but continuing to have an income stream for the property. So the first trait is that they're really a good fit for your acquisition strategy. Now, you can do deals with people who aren't a perfect fit for your acquisition strategy. You can kind of force your way through that. And even though maybe it doesn't feel like the fit is perfect, perhaps their need or their situation makes them more inclined to have this type of conversation with you than they normally would. But there are other people like these ideal sellers that things just click. The way that they want to do business really fits nicely with the way that you want to do business already. And so when you found somebody like that, it's such an important question to ask yourself, what other types of opportunity are there with these people either now or over time? So the first trait is that these most valuable sellers, they're just a good fit for your acquisition strategy. It just feels natural when you're talking with them. They don't seem to be resisting the way you're trying to conduct this conversation at all. And the second trait is that they have multiple properties. These sellers have multiple properties which they are probably going to want to unload, sell, or get rid of in one way or the other over time. Now, this is usually for this particular type of seller that we find ourselves talking with a lot. These are multiple rental properties. Not necessarily like they want to sell their vacation home and then their primary residence and this and that. It's really much more about a portfolio of their own of rental properties that now they want to often slowly disentangle themselves from. And that means that they're usually at a transition point in their lives where they just kind of want to be done. They're glad in many cases that they bought these properties. They've probably had them for quite a while, which also, leads into the capital gains topic that we just discussed or we just hit on. And they're just at a point now where, the properties have served their purposes and they just want their lifestyle to be a little bit different. Perhaps they want to do some traveling. Perhaps they just don't want to have to physically do so much maintenance, things like that. Maybe they have other just focuses and concerns in their life that they want to be able to turn their attention to. So they're at a transition point in their lives where they want to be able to do other things, and they're done a little bit now with this idea of being mom and pop landlords. A lot of these folks want to sell these properties over time. Some do actually want to sell all at the same time, but a lot of them come into the conversation with a mentality of, I need to sell one per year. That's an expression I hear quite literally in those words very often. And their mentality is, I want to sell these and I don't want to have to incur all this capital gains hit at one time, so I'm going to sell one per year. Now, as you may know, or as we'll certainly continue to talk about in this podcast, you can help them really take some of the sting out of that capital gains bill with the way you structure a seller financing deal. So you might actually be able to change that belief in their mind over time too, but they often want to sell multiple properties over time. So if you put these two things together, it's pretty clear to see that when these people are a good fit for your acquisition strategy and you're a good fit for their disposition strategy, you might say, that there's a natural clicking that happens. There's a comfort level. And when they have multiple properties that they need to sell, that comfort level is super, super valuable to them. The idea of getting through one transaction with you and then needing to start over completely from scratch with somebody else a few months or a year, a couple years later on the next property doesn't seem nearly as appealing to them as going back to the well. And that's kind of the metaphor that I want you to think about. You're going back to the well of a deal that that you were able to get done with people who were just so well suited for you. And you're going back to the well and you're saying, I can buy multiple properties from them. But you know what's happening on the flip side of that equation? The exact same thing. Your sellers are thinking, I'm going to go back to the well and I'm going to go back to that buyer because that experience was great. It was easy. We got what we wanted out of it. It was structured correctly. Why wouldn't we go back to the same person and want to have plan A be to sell them our next property and next properties as well? And that's in my story that I told you here, actually how these things came about as well. I bought the first house from these folks and I knew that they had other rentals, and I sort of planted a seed with them in their mind in which I said, when it's time for you to move on from these other properties, I would sure appreciate the opportunity to be the first person you talk to, because I really enjoyed how we worked together the first time. And I'm always in buying mode for a great property with great people. And that's what you are and what you have. And I would be honored to have that conversation with you. So a couple years later, when they were in the mindset of wanting to sell that property, they decided to go back to the well. And I was their well. And I thought to myself, great, I'm going back to the well too. I want to buy more properties. I want to structure them very similarly to how I did before. And so we both went back to the well, which is really the definition of a perfect synergistic and symbiotic type of relationship. So the question, of course, you might be thinking is, well, how do I find these people? Because yeah, this sounds great. These people do sound super valuable as seller leads, people that I can develop relationships with and go to that well over time, and they can come to my well over time too. How do I find these people? Well, as you know, we like to do off-market marketing, and we're not looking for distressed and motivated sellers. And, and as I said at the very beginning of this, if you think your job is to go find, quote, motivated sellers who have found themselves in a financial bind of some kind right now, then you're going to completely walk right by these folks, because these people often do not have any of the signs of being motivated sellers. Their motivations are not spray painted on their foreheads. They're much more subtle. They're much more just unique to their context, and they're not outwardly showing. But once you start talking with them, you really do understand that their motivation is to spend their time in different ways, or to be able to go to their granddaughter's traveling basketball team games all the time. And so if you're looking for motivated sellers, you're going to miss these people completely. And motivated sellers, of course, often because they're in a financial bind, they're not owners of many properties. They're not people that are a well that you will be able to go back to, and you're not a well that they're going to be able to go back to in the future, usually either, because they're just pretty much handling a one-time problem that they have, and you're helping them out of that situation. So how do you find these people? Well, as you know, in our strategy is using what we call thoughtful direct mail, and we get our lists from our title company partners. Now, you could go through your title company partners to try to find people whose names are on the title of multiple properties, and that might work, but it also might not work very well for a couple reasons. One of maybe the most obvious is that sellers, especially the ones that are a little more sophisticated, often take title in different names. They vest in different names. They might have multiple business entities like LLCs. This one might be titled in the wife's name. This one might be titled in the husband's name. The third one might be titled as, the so-and-so family trust. And it might just be hard to connect those dots and to really find them using your database type of work. So instead, what I recommend you do is you do your normal thoughtful marketing to your non-distressed sellers, and you do it in your relational manner, and you do it where you're reaching out to them about a specific property. And when you get that lead, when you connect with those people, when you meet them, ask yourself the question, what other opportunities do I see here? Ask them some nice, politely phrased questions that are just woven into your normal conversation with them. You might ask the seller, so Mrs. Seller, how did you find yourself with this property? Is this something you've been doing a lot of? You've got a rental portfolio that you've built over time, or is this a one-time situation where you moved out of this house perhaps you lived in and then you kept it as a rental? And if you open the door like that, people will often tell you what other types of properties they have, if any. Sometimes people proactively tell you what other properties they have because they are trying to position themselves as being financially strong and being sophisticated. This is a bit of a tangent, but sometimes sellers have their guard up at the beginning because they assume you are there to exploit some kind of perceived, distress or motivation in them. And so sometimes they want you to know right off the bat, hey, I'm not, quote, motivated. I'm not in a financial pinch. I know what I'm doing. And so sometimes they'll give you information about some of their other holdings just as part of their effort to do that. Well, that's great. All you're really trying to do at the beginning is just learn about your seller lead, understand who they are, how they think, what other things that they have, and just understand the bigger picture of them. So as you do that, then you'll be able to see if there might be other types of opportunities with these people, either in the present or, as we're talking about on this episode, over time in the future. And then lastly, as you do know which sellers you're talking to that have other properties that you feel might be candidates for you to buy in the future, I'd really encourage you to give that some weight in your current thinking. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'll tell you, if I'm talking to two sellers that are basically identical in their situations, the properties are very similar. If I know there's one of those two sellers that has more properties in the future that I feel like I might be able to buy from them, then that seller to me is more valuable than the other seller. Even though the deal that we might do today with these two sellers is virtually exactly the same, the seller with whom I see more potential in the future is the one that I would rank higher in my own mind as well. So I would work really hard to take advantage of establishing that relationship with them and getting the first deal under my belt, because I could see down the road and around the corner, knowing that there might be a good chance that there are more things that we could do together in the future. So thanks for listening to today's episode of Racking Up Rentals. Again, show notes are at www.thoughtfulre.com/E37 for episode 37. Please do us a big favor by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app. And also, if you'd be so kind, rate and review the show. Just give us your honest take on what you're learning from the show, how you like it, and that will definitely help other people find us. Also, did you know that we have a Facebook group for thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs as well? It's a great forum for us to get together and people of our similar school of thought and mindset connecting together. It's called Rental Portfolio Wealth Builders. So just search Rental Portfolio Wealth Builders on Facebook. You'll find the group, and we would love to have you join us there. If you like this episode, please take a screenshot of it and post that screenshot to Instagram and tag us at Thoughtful Real Estate. Until next time, I look forward to talking to you then. I hope you have a great week and get out there and let's go rack up some rentals.
Thanks for listening to Racking Up Rentals, where we build long-term wealth by being win-win deal makers. Remember, solve the person to unlock the deal and solve the financing to unlock the profits.